again, they're in bed with Vanguard, they're in bed with BlackRock, S&P. And so they'll come to the CEOs, and the CEOs have come out and said like that this is happening to them. And they say, if you don't improve your score with them, either we're going to pull all of our investors, and when you're Vanguard and BlackRock, I mean, you own 60% of most of the companies combined. They're each using about 30%. So, either you do that and we'll tank your stock and ruin your company, or we'll just vote you out at the next shareholder meeting. We'll get a CEO who will do those things. So when people wonder, like, why did Bud Light do what it did?
I was just going to ask.
Because obviously it was so off-brand for them.
Yeah.
It was that, or the CEO gets his job pulled.
Welcome back to the podcast Tell Them For Me, brought to you by Road to Purity. We are joined by a very special guest today, Evan Frazier. He is a faith-based financial planner and founder of Tek Wise Financial. He has over 15 years of experience in the financial services industry, and Evan helps individuals and families align investments with their values and faith, ensuring wealth reflects their principles. Evan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So we were curious, actually, just to start with, what led you to create specifically faith-driven financial planning? I mean, what exactly does that mean to be faith-driven in that regard?
What I found as I kind of started looking into the investment world and as a planner is what's kind of happening underneath the lid of all these investments. So when I worked at a company called Personal Capital, that was something that they did, but they looked at it more from a concentration standpoint of, you think you're diversified, but you're not. You're actually really concentrated in just a few companies. And that kind of got me the idea as I started looking at it, well, what's inside of those companies and what are they doing? And so it really led me to understand that there's a lot of hidden things that violate my morals, my code, and I didn't want to profit from that. And the Bible's been very clear about, you don't bring the wages of a prostitute into the church. And so I think part of it was just God led me to tell everyone, that this is happening, because I think most people don't know it's happening.
Right. So how do you help people then know what to do to steer clear of that, or what do you recommend to make sure that I'm not investing my money or doing something that's going to end up supporting something I don't support?
Sure. So there's a company out there called Inspire Investments, and they're one of a few different companies I work with, but they've got a great tool that allows people to kind of peel back the onion and see what's inside their investments. So usually when somebody comes to me and they're like, well, how bad could it really be? This will usually start with taking a collection of, all right, what are you investing in? And I can run it through their tool, and then it'll come back and tell us, hey, this part of the fund is investing in pharmaceuticals that make abortion drugs, or this company inside of here actually helps distribute pornography or things like that. And I think the first step is people are always shocked at what they see in there. And so we've got a couple options. We've got different screens. So we have ones that align up with the U.S. Catholic bishops, so we can look through that lens. We've got some other ones that have been put together by some Protestant pastors and things like that. And then if clients, usually more of my engineer types, if they want to really get into the weeds, they can create their own screens and talk about the things that they care about within there. That's usually where I start. And then once we've kind of identified how bad the problem is, then we can start to look at, okay, we like kind of the philosophy of this indexing. So how do we rebuild the indexes but remove the specific companies that are causing those problems?
Okay. So you're indexing, you're talking about like S&P 500, for example. How many companies on there are investing in... and can you give some examples of like what types of things? You mentioned already abortion and different things like that. What overall do you see a lot of that obviously is not going to align with our Catholic values or Christian values, but what do you see?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the major media companies, so your Amazon, your Netflix, your Apple, a lot of people don't realize that because they're so nebulous that they do have porn distribution centers to their business. Okay.
Interesting.
Now, I think one of the things I always talk about, and I think that's something that Inspired does a good job of talking about, is that doesn't mean that you can't go out and buy an Apple iPhone, right? you can still buy their products that are not causing the problems, but it's different when you start investing in the companies,
Right.
because now you're profiting from it, which is, I think it's an important distinction to make, because it's like, you want to reward the companies for making the good things, right? You want to reward them
Right.
for making the phone, but you want to get them to move away from the other things that they're doing.
Yeah, I've always wondered that myself, because I feel like today there's more and more I keep finding things that things that I don't support, things that I don't like, even Kroger and a lot of other companies, especially after the Roe v. Wade got overturned, and then all of a sudden so many companies were talking about, we'll pay to fly you to a state that has abortions and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, I think it was Hello Bella was one of them, and it's like, we're starting to pay attention more to healthy products, right, that aren't full of chemicals and all this kind of stuff, and a lot, especially for our kids, and a lot of the ones for kids are also supporting that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I want to support, like, can't we just ignore, all of the side? It's difficult, because as a nonprofit, obviously we want businesses, and we've had businesses support us. But on one hand, sometimes I want to be like, how about all the businesses just stop having side things that they support or donate to or whatever? And can you just make a good product? And if I like the product, I'll buy it. And if I don't, then, it's like with Apple, we use a lot of Apple stuff, a lot of great technology, but there's a lot of other stuff that we don't want to support. And it's always a bummer to me that those are intertwined, The
one that always blows my mind are the diaper companies that donate to Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what backwards thinking? Yeah.
Yeah, you're killing off your future market.
Yeah, yeah.
I think with that, though, I think sometimes when we talk about like biblically responsible investing, people only talk about excluding companies. But I think one of the things we also focus, and again, what I like about Inspire and Timothy Plans and some of those, is that we can then also focus on working with the companies that want to do better.
Right.
And we can also stop some of the companies from acting bad. So I'll give you an example with Inspire. They do a lot of lobbying, not necessarily for Christian values, but for businesses to remain neutral. Mm-hmm. So M&T Bank out of the Midwest was starting to debank Christians that were had certain political views. Well, Inspire was a major shareholder with them, so they went back to them and said, look, we're not asking you to go out and go door to door and talk about Jesus, but we want you to treat everybody the same. And just because they have political views you don't agree with. And they were able to push back and get them to stop doing that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And not every time they win. So it was interesting. So they recently had gotten on, I think it was at Apple, and they were able to push a shareholder proposal to try and get Apple to stop doing some of these things. They didn't win, but that was the first time that a proposal like that had ever made it onto the voting for Apple shareholders. And so eventually we'll come to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd always wondered, because all you hear about is, well, let's just boycott this company. I didn't know you could do that to try and influence them. That's really cool.
Well, I mean, the other side is doing it heavily. So
heavenly too. Yeah.
That works.
If you ever heard of something called the Human Rights Council, they are the largest LGBTQ lobbying group in the United States, and they've been around for a long time. And what they do is they create this human equality index. But basically what it is they rate companies how friendly they are to the LGBTQ movement. But what happens is that, again, they're in bed with Vanguard, they're in bed with BlackRock, S&P, and so they'll come to the CEOs, and the CEOs have come out and said like that this is happening to them. And they say, if you don't improve your score with them, either we're going to pull all of our investors, and when you're Vanguard and BlackRock, I mean, you own 60% of most of the companies combined. They're each using about 30%. So, either you do that and we'll tank your stock and ruin your company, or we'll just vote you out at the next shareholder meeting. We'll get a CEO who will do those things. So when people wonder, like, why did Bud Light do what it did?
I was just going to ask.
Because obviously it was so off-brand for them.
Yeah.
It was that, or the CEO gets his job pulled.
Interesting. So that's something I've actually been really curious about. because it's like it seemed obvious that was going to affect them financially. Like it had an impact, right? I mean, they had a major. I think their stock went down and all those kinds of things.
Stock crashed. Bud Light. I don't think it's still recovered. It used to be the number one selling beer, and I don't think it's back up there yet.
No.
I mean, in hindsight, they probably say, well, would have been better just to not do what you were trying to pressure us to, and we wouldn't have ended up as bad.
Well, you see some of the other companies like Tractor Supply and a couple of these others have started coming out, kind of reading the tea bags to say, all right, we're getting rid of the DEI, we're doing these things, which, again, all we're asking is to say neutral, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I'm like, I'm not asking that you need to go bend over backwards to support traditionally Christian values to a certain degree, but don't bend over backwards to go against them in a way, especially with Disney right now is a big one for me. But
one thing I was going to ask, you mentioned about how not investing in, like, say, for Apple, for example, that has some of their stocks in some of these questionable areas, because then you're making a profit off of them. But if you're buying their products, aren't you still fueling their profit?
But you're not fueling it through buying the things that are causing the problems. And so what you want to do is you want to reward the companies for making the things that are good. And so when they're looking through their bottom lines and looking at these things and saying, all right, are we really making that much money from doing these other things?
But does that really work if they're being influenced, like you said, where someone comes in and says, look, you need to do this or we're going to find a new CEO? And clearly it almost seems to me sometimes like it has nothing to do with the actual financials. Because I've wondered this myself. I've gone back and forth. We've stopped paying for like Disney Plus and buying Disney related things because of a lot of stuff they're coming out with towards children. But I have thought, like, okay, would it be morally acceptable to just only watch or buy the things that we support? So like if we had Disney Plus, right, and they're sitting there looking at their metrics and looking at their data, they can see that all of their movies that are pushing some other agenda are doing poorly, which we have seen. I mean, every movie they've come out with, it's got some stuff in it is not doing well, but they keep doing it. So is that really effective? Does that work morally, or is there other things at play here that they're not going to pay attention to the bottom line?
So I think there are two things at work here that we would never need to cover on this. One is it's not just those companies, and here's what I mean by that. So we'll use abortion drugs as an example here.
Sure.
Okay. Vanguard invests in these pharmaceutical companies that make abortion drugs. But they know that to make those companies profitable, they have to have more and more abortions every year. Okay. So what does Vanguard do? Well, they're also, by themselves a 30% shareholder in Disney and all these other media companies. So if you've wondered why they've gone woke and why they've stayed doing some of those things, is because Vanguard and BlackRock have gone in and said, look, we need to make these other companies that were invested in profitable, we need you to make abortion look more normalized. And so you see a 27% year-over-year increase in positive abortion mentions in media. Why is that? It's because they're being pressured. So it's one of those things where Vanguard looks at it and says, I don't really care that much if we maybe lose a little bit from Disney because we're going to make way more money over there, right? And we'll offset that on the whole. Right. Okay. So you've got some of that pressure. I think it does help because they do track those metrics, and it may not be something that we can see right away, and it's not an instant fix, but I think you are going to start to see, and especially with the rise of companies like Angel Studios and things like that, and as they start to gain more market share, it's just the economics. You got to make it more unprofitable for them, that even if they're selling more of these other things, whether it's abortion drugs, whether it's transgender care drugs and things like that, I think you have to fight back and just make it unprofitable in those. The other flip side of that is why it's so important then to invest through a biblically responsible company like Inspire, because then, the more money that Inspire is managing makes it easier for them to have a bigger say at the table, right? So theoretically, let's say that Inspire and Vanguard owned the exact same companies in the fund, it was the exact same thing, I would want to buy it through Inspire because that gives them more power to lobby on my behalf for those values.
Okay.
That's why I think biblically responsible investing has an opportunity to help save the culture, save the country, because it allows us to lobby and push back behind the scenes. Because again, most people have no idea this is happening.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know that. Well, I guess I knew it to a certain degree, and obviously there's a lot of companies you see doing different things like, I know Starbucks donates a lot, I think, to Planned Parenthood and different things like that. I am curious, actually, like to backtrack a little bit and get a clear picture of what actually is happening. So the example you gave, Apple, you said something about pornography distribution centers. What does that mean exactly? What does that look like?
Yeah, so they let different apps into their system so that you can download it on the phone, and then they get a cut of the money that people spend through those apps.
Okay. They do?
Mm-hmm.
I could have sworn Apple didn't allow that on their
They had gone back and forth on it.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's that they allow the distribution through their devices, through their stores, through their media, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then they get a cut of it.
Right. Well, right, because you get a cut of everything on the Apple Store.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, I thought that they didn't allow that, but it's interesting.
I think Steve Jobs, didn't, and I think Tim Cook was the one who might have let it back on.
I could see that.
I have to go back and recheck my notes on it, but yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, that makes sense. So it can be things like that where the company is part of their actual company itself is profiting from that kind of stuff. So for Amazon, it could be stuff that's being sold on Amazon that they're not restricting. They're not restricting it.
Also, using it for like the AWS systems for storage cloud for the porn websites and things like that.
Right. Yeah. Their cloud server that they have. The Amazon Web Services?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So there's a difference, though, then between... how do you look at the difference between a company like Starbucks, for example, donating probably a significant amount of money to Planned Parenthood, so they're directly fueling that, versus like a part of their platform, they're just not restricting something that you don't agree with?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it can get a little touchy. Starbucks is an easy one for me to boycott because I don't drink coffee, but I've never liked them. But I think you just have to draw a line in there. And I think it raises another point as a shareholder. Your job as the company CEO is to maximize value for the shareholders while at the same time providing a good and safe product for people, right? So as a shareholder, I'm wondering, where's the value in this for me? When you are donating the profits, it should come back to me either as a shareholder or should go back to the business to create new things or maybe pay more benefits to the employees. Why are we donating that money to Planned Parenthood? If you as a CEO want to take the money out of your $100 million, I think he just got a $90 million raise. It was something outrageous. And, fine. You want to donate your own money? You do you. But as a shareholder... Right. Why is my money being used for this?
Right. And that's another thing that I've wondered is the individual people in the company, exactly that thought. It's like you can do what you want behind closed doors to a certain degree. Not that we support hurting other people in a certain way, which we believe abortion does, but you have to bring the company into it. Right. Yeah.
And I think it goes back to kind of Inspire's mantra of like just trying to keep it neutral.
Now, how do we tell or discern what retailers or what businesses we should support? Maybe we're not investing in them, but we're engaging in their products or activities. So when you look at everything from Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Walmart, Target, everybody has questionable business practices of what they're investing in and what they're doing, what they're selling, whatever. If we start drawing a line at anything that is anti-Christian in values, pretty soon we're living in the woods by ourselves. How do we justify this? Or how do we work
to be clear, I think that's part of what you're saying is not necessarily stopping using these companies at all, but don't you support the things that they do well that are appropriate, right?
mean, I think it goes back somewhat to the Catholic principle of subsidiarity, like trying to keep it as local. It's been more expensive, but we've been trying in our family to do more around working with local businesses when we can. But to your point, you can't always do that. Okay. Amazon, I really personally just dislike Jeff Bezos. I think he's a terrible person. And my wife kind of laughs sometimes because sometimes people will send us stuff, or I'll order something from a completely neutral third party, and Amazon will be the one to deliver it. And my wife's trying to hide the boxes so I don't get mad. And so I think it's the best efforts. I think you have to kind of weigh, where there's an opportunity to shop at local companies that don't have those problems, then we try and do that. And if I'm forced into Walmart, I'll pick Walmart over Target most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So it is a hard thing to do, but I think it kind of comes down to each person's, walk with God and how they want to discern that.
And I think that's part of the question is, so in your opinion, if you have the ability to boycott something, I know we talked about different ways to influence the companies, but if you have the ability to stop using a company, should you?
Yeah, and I think, again, that's what I love about being Catholic, is that everybody can kind of form their conscience through guidance of the church. But for some of these things that are a little bit more in the gray, that we are able to form kind of our own conscience around those things.
Sure. Yeah, I had a priest once talking about some of these things once before, mentioned that when he's forced to go to a certain place, like there's certain things that he, for medical reasons or through the pharmacy, I can't remember why, has to go to Kroger, and he doesn't support a lot of things that they support and all that kind of stuff, that he's a process of making reparations every time he does. So I think he just, when he gets back to his car, he says a Hail Mary or something and offers it up in reparation for whatever Kroger is doing. I don't remember specifically, and things like that, which I think is another way to kind of approach the issue by increasing prayer on behalf of those people and for those people who are involved in these companies and making these decisions and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And it is difficult, and I think it really does come down to where there's a option that's outside of that we really should look at those. And I'll give you an example. I work with a company called Pro-Life Payments, and they process, credit card and bank account payments for businesses and nonprofits. And part of why Jared started this company is, PayPal, Stripe, Square, a lot of times they donate. Some of them are actually investors in Planned Parenthood. So the problem is every time you swipe that card, a portion of the money that you make, or that you're paying on that, is going to go back to support Planned Parenthood. And I'm going to call out the Colorado Springs Diocese right now. So they work with a company called Blackbaud. They've been informed that Blackbaud donates heavily to Planned Parenthood. So every time that somebody in the church donates to the diocese, a portion of that money is going back to Planned Parenthood. And they just kind of said, not our problem, which kind of shocked me.
Yeah, they weren't interested in changing their payment processor to something like...
They weren't even interested in having a conversation about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Was there any specific ties as to why... Can you think of why they would want to keep their... Is some benefit that they're getting that they can't get anywhere else, or?
I think it's inertia. You're so used to doing something one way, and a lot of them are volunteers, or this is their second career, and so the thought of having to try and make a change in the work involved in that, it's like, I don't want to deal with it. I think that's the more charitable way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, when you highlight that next to abortion, obviously it's like, okay, well, maybe you should put in the extra work, but I see what you're saying.
Unfortunately, as a business owner for many years or decades, when you're looking at an organization the size of a diocese, to change something as fundamental as how they collect their money through all of their parishes and everything they do, and to go and make that change is a very major undertaking, and can cost a lot of money in making the changes in the software and training and the problems and stuff that they're going to have, and all the automatic donations that are happening, I have to switch those over. I mean, they could be losing a lot of money in that process of doing that. So, not that I'm defending it, but I sure can understand. They're like, yeah, there's no way we're touching this.
From a pure
we do have other diocese that are in the process of changing, though.
Yeah, I was going to say
it's actually fairly. The nice thing about this software is it's fairly easy just to swap it out. Like there's not a lot of work behind the scenes. So.
But even so, I mean, while that makes sense, weighing that against protecting the dignity of human life is like, well, yeah, that's a lot of work, but this is more important.
And what's crazy about it, so with the pro-life payments, they partner with, what's it? I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company, but they donate 10% of their profits back to this company, and they average, it's like every $500 saves a baby's life. So like they do like the scans and things like that, and they've got it down to a science. And so I think as you nailed it, what does that work and maybe potential loss of profit versus the saving the life of a baby?
I would think actually that there would, I mean, in a Catholic diocese, I would hope that they could advertise that, hey, we're changing the way we do things so that we actually, currently we're technically supporting something we don't want to support. But on the other hand, by switching, we will actually now be helping to stop abortions and better that cause. And I would think people would respond to that and be like, sweet, yeah, I'll donate. I mean, I would hope that would be the response.
I mean, like I said, I could see the business side of it, why they would resist, but to not even have a conversation.
Yeah, at least see how bad it is.
As they might suspect, or how much is really happening and going. That's surprising.
Yeah. Which actually kind of reminds me of a quick story. So I've mentioned Inspire a few times. Robert Netzley's their CEO, and what led him to build Inspire is he was on the board of a local pro-life center. And he started looking through, because he worked in the investment field, and started looking and realized, it's like, how can I sit on this board and say that I'm pro-life and then still invest in and work with all these companies that are, making abortion drugs and things like that. And that's what really led him to not turning his life around, but changing the course of his life and building Inspire and doing some great things.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. With that, I'm curious. So for your recommendation, or it sounds like, working with Inspire, maybe because I'm part of an investing group that it's a phenomenal group, and they've got a lot of great information about investing and things like that. But a lot of people, when they try and invest, say, just throw it in the S&P, you'll average 10% a year, something like that. You mentioned before indexing. So like someone who's interested in just kind of slowly putting something somewhere, they can use Inspire to do that, or what would you recommend? So,
as great as Inspire is, they can't be perfect at everything. Mm-hmm. So when I work with my clients, I've actually built a kind of more like a robo portfolio, something akin to like a Betterment or a Wealthfront, but using faith-based investments. So, for the areas that Inspire really excels, we use them. Timothy Plans is also a good part in that we use Timothy Plans. So I think the important thing when constructing a portfolio is you have to look at all of the different areas. But what I love about the Tek Wise process is, for as little as, $50 or $100 a month, you can invest in, we'll put it into the portfolio to be built based on the risk you want, and then all the rebalancing is handled. And then you have access to a financial advisor if you want. So like if you're like, I'm 25 or I'm 30 and I don't need a full financial planner, I just want somebody to make the investments. But maybe something comes up and you're like, boy, I'd love 2 hours of your time to talk about taxes or to talk about this or that. You'll have access and you can set it up by the hour if you want help on top of it. So that's kind of what we've built recently for some of the younger investors. But then we also have our full service plan. So I have some clients that, in their 50s and 60s, they're approaching retirement and they're like, I've done a great job of saving all this money, but I have no idea how to turn it into an income stream. I think people are not prepared for the amount of taxes we're going to face there's a great book out there by David McKnight called The Power of Zero, and it's all about getting into the 0% retirement bracket. Because I truly think, and he outlays it, it's not a left or a right issue. It's going to be a math issue. Taxes are going to have to double within the next 10 to 15 years.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And
Interesting.
So, a lot of times when I have new clients come to me, a lot of times people just say, I have a financial advisor, but I want a second look. And I go through and I say, okay, here's something I haven't thought about. If taxes only go up 10%, I'm not even talking about doubling. If they only go 10%, you're not going to make it. And I think they're always shocked by that when I show them those numbers.
Wow.
Because again, it's not something a lot of advisors are talking about on that.
So how do you handle that? What do you do to prepare for that?
Well, I mean, there's a couple different ways. Everybody's situation is a little bit different, so it depends on how much they're working, how they're saving. So we might talk about Roth conversions or other just tax conversion strategies on that. I think another big thing is not everybody knows, not all income is taxed the same. Social Security is taxed different from traditional IRAs, from Roth, and life insurance is taxed differently. So it really kind of depends on the type of assets, and so everybody's plan is a little bit different, which is why we have that full service one, because what you need is going to be different from him.
Right.
But I always say if it's got a dollar sign affects your life, we'll talk about it. So we help clients not just plan for taxes, but we'll file taxes. We help with insurance. We do everything.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I will mention on that is a lot of times I'll have people say, well, my advisor's Christian. I'm like, that's great. But the company he works for isn't going to let him go outside of the things that they do. So when I worked at Edward Jones, we had like 5 mutual fund companies that we could pick from to work with. And it's because Edward Jones had a kickback system in place with those 5 companies. So it didn't matter how Christian or Catholic I wasn't allowed to really go outside of that. And so that's why I tell people it's not his fault, And to be honest, most advisors aren't even aware of this kind of stuff, let alone even if they are, that they can change it.
Right. That's interesting. I want to revisit something from earlier. Do you have any information, and if not, that's okay, I know like there's a lot of stuff from the government recently removing a lot of DEI from the country, however you want to say that. And I know I've seen a lot of companies starting to remove a lot of DEI stuff in response to that. One, how does that affect things investment-wise? Have you noticed an impact from that and how that changed anything? And does that influence, are we now okay to invest with some of these companies if they're removing some of their DEI initiatives and a lot of the transgender related stuff, especially LGBTQ, all of that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good start. I think it's a good start that they start putting pressure on those things, and then hopefully it's a move back to neutral.
To neutral,
on that. Political winds are fickle. So in 4 more years or 8 more years, maybe it slides back the other way. I think the thing is, though, the companies have to understand that there's an outsized risk, like what happened with Bud Light, what happened with Planet Fitness, that when you do these things, that the silent majority, middle-class America doesn't like these things.
Yeah.
And so, as Disney is finding out, when you move away from family values after you've built an entire company on family values, it's not going to go well.
Right. That makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate having you on the podcast. I just want, for everyone out there, can you tell everyone where can they find you if they wanted to use some of your resources or the robo investing, but Tek Wise Financial?
Absolutely. So you can always check us out on the website. It's Tek Wise, and that's TEKWISE.com. I'm also heavily on LinkedIn. I do quite a bit on LinkedIn, so you can look me up, Evan Frazier, where you can search Tek Wise on there and find me. You can email me, Evan, EVAN, at TekWise, TEKWISE, financial.com. Or you can always call me, 719-413-5614. And I know you guys will probably put in the show notes, and I'll put some of the reports and things like that we have on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely have everything in the description, all the links to Tek Wise Financial, to Evan directly. Do you have any limitations on region? Do you only serve Colorado? Do you serve nationwide?
Yep, I can serve nationwide. We just can't do international.
Okay.
If you do, actually, I'm going to take that back because I do have some clients that spend part of the year in like Mexico and things like that. As long as you have a physical address in the United States, we can work with you.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here.
Thanks again for having me, guys.
All right. And to everyone else, have a great day and God bless. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you have any topics you'd like us to discuss in future episodes, shoot us an email at ask@roadtopurity.com. Don't forget to visit our website, roadtopurity.com, for all our free resources and affordable programs to help men and women who are looking to grow in sexual purity. We rely on donations to keep doing what we do, so if you'd like to support Road to Purity, please consider donating at roadtopurity.com/donate. Thanks again for your support. God bless.